The Black Doctors podcast highlights the stories of minority professionals with the goal of inspiring others. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and share with others, because the next generation can't be what they don't see. Tune in every Monday to hear our stories told by us.
Hello and welcome back to the Black Doctors podcast. I'm Steven, your host this week. So excited to be speaking with Dr. DeLorean Griffin. He is a plastic surgeon. He is the owner and founder of Griffin Plastic Surgery. He graduated from FAMU before going on to Wayne State University for medical school as well as residency. Dr. Griffin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start at the very beginning. When did you decide that you wanted to become a physician?
Oh, a physician? Probably in college when I was at FAMU. You know, I started off at FAMU as a graphic arts major. I didn't like it very much. I was always, yes, artistically inclined, but I also had that kind of that left brain affinity for the sciences in particular. And so I switched my major to the dismay of my mother, who was distraught that I gave up a full scholarship and switched my major to biology pre-med. And so during that process, I still didn't know if I was going to pursue medicine or dentistry or forensic pathology or something else, or be a pharmaceutical salesman, who knows. But as things went along, you know, I did pretty well in my classes. I eventually graduated magna cum laude. And so, you know, kind of some of the people around me were like, well, you should maybe think about going to medical school. And probably around my junior year or so, I probably dedicated myself to taking the MCAT and trying to get into medical school. Interestingly enough, I had never met a black doctor personally.
Wow.
Even while I was at FAMU, well, I met a couple at FAMU, but they were like, you know, it was certainly not specialty people, and it was close to graduation when I met a couple of family medicine doctors. You know, which is counterintuitive to go into a black school, but took the MCAT, had to take it twice. But eventually got into Wayne State in my hometown of Detroit.
Nice. And you said you were a graphic arts major at FAMU with a scholarship?
Yeah. I've been, you know, if you follow my page, you know how,
you
know, you see some of my artwork. And I'm so artistically inclined that everybody thought that was my true passion. It really wasn't, not from a career standpoint. You know, we all hear about starving artists. You don't hear too much about starving doctors. If they're out there, we all know that. But in general, you should not be in a position where you're, financially unfit as a physician. So my, it's as ironic as it is with my mother pushing me into art. I was striving to be a doctor.
So then you left, you went home from FAMU to start medical school. How was that transition?
You know, it wasn't great. We didn't have a very strong biology department at FAMU at the time. Quite a few of my colleagues, matriculated, and we went to medical school, but just the structure and the lack of staff and the lack of resources, a lot of those resources as it pertains to getting those review courses for the MCAT and really knowing how to take the test weren't there. So I scored around average. I took the Kaplan course and went up 1 point, but still, I had a strong score. I had strong GPA.
Yeah,
and that allowed me to get my foot in the door and get into medical school, and it may have helped being in my hometown. I don't know.
Yeah, and coming from HBCU to PWI for grad school, how was that transition?
I wanted to go to FAMU specifically for the fact that, you're around your own people and you're around like-minded people. But, and also coming from Detroit, is a majority black city, but I also lived in Maryland, in the suburbs of Maryland. So it was a very diverse. And I lived in a town called Gaithersburg, which is a Montgomery County suburb. You're in Virginia, you might know. But it's a very diverse area. Pretty much, any demographic can be represented And so that transition to a PWI, even though I'm in a majority black city, still I was able to kind of, it wasn't any type of culture shock being around different cultures. The Wayne State was a school of medicine is, I think, still the biggest single campus medical school in the country.
Wow.
Yeah, at the time we had 265 students, and there's well beyond 300 now. Yeah, so out of that, it was probably a good 40. No, it was less than that. Probably we had a big class for Wayne State, and it was about 27 black people. Yeah, but as we do, we band together within our whatever black organization you may have, Black Medical Association in our case.
Yeah. So as you progressed through medical school, at what point did you settle on plastic surgery?
Well, here's how things went. I did pretty okay in medical school. I adjusted well. I passed step one just fine. I did probably slightly better than average, and passed all my classes. During that time, I was still drawing because for me it was a therapeutic outlet.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of the just portraits, and I did T-shirts for the Black Medical Association and for our Black History Month program. I did like all the black doctors and posted them around the school. Actually caught some flack for that. I didn't get the proper permissions, I guess. I don't know. But I say that to say that a lot of my colleagues were like, you pretty much need to do one of two things. You either need to be a medical illustrator or you need to be a plastic surgeon. And for whatever reason at the time, I didn't really see a connection between plastic surgery and just like fine arts. But what I did was I did before I even did my general surgery rotation, I did a plastic surgery rotation at the beginning of my third year as an elective. And I was just blown away because I latched onto this mostly reconstructive surgeon, but did amazing work, craniofacial and flap reconstruction and breast reconstruction. And at that point, I kind of got under his, he took me under his wing, and kind of the rest was history. But I didn't go I didn't apply for plastic surgery. I just didn't think I had the scores. They were okay, but especially at the time for integrated plastics, it was it kind of had to be in the top 10% probably. So I didn't want to waste my time, so I just applied to general surgery with plans of maybe going into plastics. I still wasn't decided, but but yeah, I applied to Gen Surg and got into a residency as a categorical there, still in Detroit.
Gotcha.
Which helped because I was still able to connect with that physician who also helped me get into plastics. So I did the 5-year residency, full 5 years, and then did an independent program in the same program.
At Wayne State?
Wayne State Detroit Medical Center.
Gotcha. And that was so it's a 3-year fellowship?
Yeah. So it had gone, the year before, it had just gone from 2 to 3, which in a strange way deterred a lot of people from going into it. I mean, I'm like, it's only one more year. And so that didn't deter me, but what it did was kind of made it less competitive, so to speak. And not to say I wasn't competitive, but, it made the pathway a little bit easier.
Gotcha.
And again, I was able to be with this professor that was able to guide me in the right direction. So if we want to jump into my plastics fellowship, which I also did at Detroit Medical Center, it was kind of the halfway point. A professor of mine, we were going to the OR. He wound up having an MI right in front of me and passing away a few days later. Yeah. And so halfway through my program, I was like, dang, this is my mentor. Like, we were like family at that point. And he passes away. And so that kind of left me with the sense of hanging in the breeze. But at the same time, he lived on through his, with, with surgical skills and knowledge he had passed on. And I carry that with me to this day.
What was his name?
Dr. Bala Krishnan, Dr. Bala for short, Indian fellow, but man, he was masterful. He was masterful, and like I said, he treated me like family.
It's clear the incredible lasting impact that he's had on your life and the trajectory of your career.
Absolutely.
So Dr. Griffin, what would you say was the hardest part about becoming a plastic surgeon?
Honestly, it's the exams are very difficult in plastic surgery. Probably more difficult than they need to be, because we cover such a. I mean, if you think about plastic surgery, it's head to toe. There's no part of the body that we don't operate on, pretty much. I mean, on the outside, so to speak. So, and it also includes a lot of derm, a lot of ENT, OMS, the non-invasive stuff, all the lasers. We had, like the exams would ask you about the nanometers, the lasers. The in-service was very difficult. I did well on them. I don't know. I studied my butt off, but I happened to do well. I actually got the top score 2 years in a row, which kind of got some people that didn't hold me in such high regards off my back.
Yeah,
for whatever reason. But it prepared you well for the boards, which is a very difficult exam. But there's that. There's kind of deciding what type of plastic surgeon you're going to be and implementing that. And I give hats off to anybody who could jump off the porch straight out of residency and go into private practice. And I would say that's even at this juncture, I'm 6 years out of residency. That business aspect is something that we don't get taught very much about, because you are a business owner. You have employees now. You have overhead that you have to meet. You have to, you have payroll.
Let's talk about those first 6 years after fellowship training when you started to practice. How did that go for you?
So I happened to luck up because for me, the most ideal circumstance was to be employed by somebody who would pay you a steady paycheck until you got busy, allowed you to study for your boards, kind of gave you that time, and also gave you some CME money. And like I said, for me initially, that is a good thing. And what tends to happen is by the time you get busy, most hospital systems don't know what to do with you, especially if you become more of a cosmetic surgeon or implement more cosmetic surgery into your practice. Because of the cash and just how it's distributed, and people just most hospital systems don't have that business savvy mentality, as a part of the systems based entity. So I'll tell everybody there's advantages and disadvantages to every situation. I think that you're gonna have you have a contract, and most people I think don't stay longer than their first contract if they're going to be hospital employed and they made a name for themselves. I happen to stay a little bit longer, 2-3 year contracts, but I got busy probably after that third year, and after that point, you have a lot of not only restrictions by being hospital employed, but you also have a lot of or lack thereof support when it comes to some of the advertising and some of the control you give up during that process. And so, my mentality started to evolve into a point where, I can do this for myself.
So let's dig into that a little bit. You said the way the cash is distributed, especially when it comes to maybe cosmetic procedures. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I mean, the way a lot of, if you think about it, you probably know all about the RVU system. most specialties, if they're employed by a hospital, get paid through RVUs, which is a relative value unit, which kind of ascribes a number to whatever procedure you're doing, right? So when you deal with cosmetics, it's difficult because they're paying you cash and they don't really have a way of accurately distributing, ascribing a certain relative value unit to that money that they give you. And so I get you get a salary and you get a bonus, but a lot of times you're going to feel like you're being shortchanged in those situations because of the way they've now distributed that money, and oftentimes feels like it's an unfair situation.
So maybe if a procedure costs $5,000, the patient's paying you cash, or they're paying the hospital cash?
They're paying the hospital the cash. The patient pays kind of one fee. They're paying the facility fee. They're paying the cash to the hospital with a surgeon's fee on my behalf, and then supposed to be kind of converted into RVUs, and it doesn't always line up. And that's what happens probably in most situations across the board. Hospital employee situations for plastic surgeons, I think, are great if you're doing the vast majority of reconstructive cases, because there's no ambiguity there when it comes to the CPT codes and how it's kind of converted. But if I do a BBL, nobody knows what. No, there's like one at the time. There's one fat graft code, which could be 50 cc's of fat versus 500 cc's per butt cheek, and that's doing the butt BBL is a lot more involved than putting in a few cc's of fat around the breast.
Gotcha. And I imagine a BBL from Dr. Griffin would be different from a BBL from Joe Schmo down the street potentially.
Yeah, there's a variety of reasons for that. I think there's some ethnic reasons why there's ethnic ideals, so to speak. I think our people, African American women, and a lot of Hispanic women, an increasing number of white and Arabic women want more volume, more curves, more of a voluptuous figure, more curvaceousness, and so we make them bigger. That could segue into a lot of things.
But the RVUs are the same.
Yeah. So the RVUs are the same, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So whether I do put in 200 versus 500 versus 1,000, even though it's more work, that gives you an example of how, how non-equitable it can be.
Yeah. And then you mentioned different restrictions that you may have as an employed physician versus being on your own.
Yeah. And that's going to vary whatever situations, because I have friends that that were in different hospital systems and they set up their own website. They allowed them to, at least, and even gave them a stipend to do so. That was never happening with me. I tried. And so my situation became all pretty much word of mouth.
Oh, whoa. So they could tell you that you cannot have your own personal website?
Yep. I could not have my own personal website. I can have my social media, but yeah, they're going to be kind of keeping an eye on that to make sure you're staying on message while you're employed under them. And I had a few talking to. Not getting any more of those talks. But that just goes into it, to how you want to become your own entity, separate from the hospital as it evolved anyways. So for me, I'm a natural hustler. I was selling my artwork in elementary school.
With crayon?
Hell no, I was in advanced elementary school at artist. I was shading and using color pencils and doing watercolor and sculpting, actually. Yeah. Sculpting Ninja Turtles, you name it. And so what I did was I went out and started visiting hair salons, spas, massage parlors, you name it. I even put some of my business cards in my tailor's business. And eventually And I think it helped me being black in a black city and this being my hometown. The word got out quicker than it may have in other circumstances. And I was able to build a practice off of word of mouth.
Wow. Hustling.
Oh, yeah, I hustled. I mean, when they try to, they come to you and they say, well, you're not doing enough. You need to do more. And I show them what I've been doing. And I said, you got to open up your books to see why it's not translating into what you think is non-productivity. Eventually, they got the picture.
So after 6 years of working in this setting, which again, like you've mentioned, different strokes for different folks, it worked for some people. But eventually, after 6 years, you said it's time to make some changes, and you stepped out on your own. You recently opened your own practice, Griffin Plastic Surgery. Talk about that.
Yeah, last Tuesday, actually, I saw my first set of patients. So, when I separated from the hospital, which I knew was inevitable, it was a beautiful thing. It was like, it was a big blow for freedom, because I knew that even though I didn't have the financial support, at that time, I didn't feel like I needed it anymore. But I knew I had the control at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Control over marketing, control over how I interacted with my patients, control over, now I can book PR, PR programs. I'll be on Channel 4 here in Detroit next week. And I just have the freedom to do that without having to ask for permission first. And it's a beautiful thing. Now they kind of, the way they kind of transit, there wasn't much of a transition. So it kind of left the patients that were waiting for me hanging in the breeze. But
oh man,
the beautiful thing was they followed me.
Because they try to tell you, because you can't take patients, there's some rules or whatever when you're leaving, right?
Listen, yeah. So you got to, and this is really important. And I implore everyone that's on the first contract, have a lawyer kind of go through everything with you. My contract wasn't really complicated, but there's always going to be some type of non-compete language.
Yeah.
There's always going to be non-inducement of staff, which essentially means you can't. Not necessarily that you can't take staff with you, although, the legalities could fall under that. But you definitely can't go and say, well, I'm going to pay you more than the hospital is. Why don't you come over here with me? So not only do my patients want to come with me, the staff wanted to come with me too, because, everybody, I'm talking about everybody from the OR to my office staff to receptionists, everybody. And, I couldn't afford to hire everybody, but I kind of had to, I think what we did was came to a meeting of the minds, and they weren't really butt heads about a lot of stuff. My non-compete was only 5 miles. You can see some contracts out there with non-compete is 50 miles. Even if you're in a metropolitan area,
yeah,
you're out of that area, So the 5 mile thing was easy for me, to set up shop where I wanted to. And the kind of inducement of staff thing, I think if you put out an ad, it's staff and patients. Yeah. So in plastic surgery, you're not going to tell somebody where they're going to have plastic surgery. You're not going to say, well, we have plastic surgeons still in our system. This is elective surgery. Yeah. They're going to go where they want to go. So that was kind of an easy thing. And I didn't have to dangle any fruit or any of that in front of people to get them to come over to Griffin Plastic Surgery.
Yeah, so as you start to build this, you have to find an office. What went into getting this off the ground? So yeah, it's not easy. The best thing is to talk to somebody that's done it before, because the first thing I did was reach out to a realtor and kind of found some space. And in this environment with the COVID, it actually worked out because there was a lot of space to rent. Because initially I was going to team up with a dermatologist, and we were going to buy a building together to start a practice.
That didn't work out because there wasn't a lot of inventory for sale, but rentals, there was a lot, and they gave very good deals. Like right now, I have a deal where I don't have to pay any rent for 5 months. And so that worked out, and it's like 5 minutes from my house as well. So there was that. Then you had to think about other things like, you have to get re-credentialed. If you're credentialed with the hospital, it's not being the same. It's not like you're just leaving and you get to keep your credential. You have to be re-credentialed under your business. So you have to form a PLLC in most cases, and get an EIN number, and then get re-credentialed at other hospitals. And thankfully for me, I didn't have to I didn't have to deal with any type of non-compete, because I think the hospital kind of saw some value in the things I was doing, like taking call, seeing a lot of uninsured patients. So there was that. There was finding your staff. That was kind of easy, knowing who your staff, the people that worked with you previously, and could offer. You've already vetted them, and so if you can get around the language of non-inducement, I think that's a great way of going about things. Otherwise, just find a staffing company, getting equipment, getting supplies. It's all stuff that's not easy, and it's all stuff that's really not easy in COVID.
Yeah.
All the delays and all of the supply chain issues that everyone's having across the board, across every industry, right?
So you have your office, you got your staff where you can see patients, and then you get credentialed to other hospitals so you can use their operating room. Is that how it works?
Yeah. Yep. And the best thing for me was to get credentialed at a few hospital systems. Try not to spread yourself too thin when you do that. Try to, for me, I was able to stay kind of on the west side of Metro Detroit. But I know people coming straight out of residency, they just get credentialed at every single hospital, and they're just from hospital to hospital, taking call at every hospital. You get burned out that way. You're burned out on residency, you know that, right? You don't want to be burned out as an attendant. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. So when it comes to Griffin Plastic Surgery, tell us where you are, the market you're serving, the services that you're offering.
So I'm mainly breast and body. I do some face. I don't really do rhinoplasty because I feel like I would need the extra training to really learn the nuances of, because every slight move that you make makes a huge difference in a rhinoplasty. So most of the people that do it are super specialized. You don't just dabble in rhinoplasty, right? You really have to know the intricate details. And I did a few in residency, but it wasn't enough to make me feel comfortable. So mainly breast and body, tummy tucks, breast lift, breast reduction, a lot of BBLs. And then, I was blessed to, this is a good thing about being a part of the hospital, because they were a high volume bariatric center. Mm-hmm. And so they were feeding me patients from day one for their tummy tucks, skin tightening procedure,
gotcha.
Breast lift, back lift, thigh lift, arm lift, all of that. It was funny because I always thought I was going to be the BBL guy coming straight out of residency. I'm like, I'm Black. People know who I am, I think, in Detroit. And this is a Black city, and everybody wants these big booties. I'm gonna be this BBL king. And yeah, it didn't happen overnight. I had to really get my name out there, because a lot of people gravitate towards the Miamis and even going out of the medical tourism in the Dominican Republic. Yeah, do a lot more. But what I became was the arm guy because of my bariatric population, arm and and tummy tucks, which is your various skin tightening procedures. And it was crazy because I had never done any arms in residency, so I watched a couple of YouTube videos, read some publications, and I got really good at doing brachioplasty. So I became known for that. then eventually everything else fell into place. So I have a very robust bariatric population, very robust just mommy makeover population. I still breast reconstruction as well, but I don't really have that referral pattern right now.
So Dr. Griffin, where can people find you and get a hold of your office?
Yeah, you can visit my website, griffinplasticsurgery.com. You can visit my now public Instagram, Griffin_plastic_surgery. We got a Facebook page, Griffin Plastics, and we'll be all over Google soon, and YouTube. I'll be starting a YouTube page soon as well. Everybody says I need to join TikTok, but I'm a little wary about that.
Well, Dr. Griffin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing the world of plastic surgery and what it takes to open your own practice and step out on your own. Thank you for doing what you do and for coming out, because representation matters.
All right, well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. You can come and do my anesthesia anytime.
The Black Doctors Podcast is a nonprofit, volunteer passion project with the goal of inspiring all who listen. Tune in next week for another episode of the Black Doctors Podcast with Dr. Stephen Bradley, your friendly neighborhood anesthesiologist.